Frank, are you hearing okay?
I'm hearing just fine.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and start the session.
Okay, well, give me a moment. I'm going to try to make things a little bit better. And I have to apologize. This afternoon has not been a good day for me and machines. Because first my printer wouldn't print out good copies. And then my computer 20 minutes ago decided to stop functioning. So I'm on my secondary computer. All right, I think that'll look better than it did. Yeah, well, you can see part of my face. Oh, well. Okay. Let me see here. Let me pull. Do this. Okay, let's pop that up. And then we go back here. I want to share screen. And that's what I want to share. Okay, share. All right. I don't know who we have as in, I see several people with call signs, so I assume you're not here for the technician class or the review. You're just here to Kibbage. I don't know how many we have, but the way I want to do this is I'm going to very quickly go over just some basics that you just have to know, and they're not anything that's on the exam per se, but they'll come up in different exams. And then we'll go through it topic by topic. If you got any questions, ask, and we'll explain what we can. First of all, there's all these weird things that you have in front of other things. Giga, mega, kilo, milli, micro, nano, and pico. Those are units, or actually measurements of units. Here you see the chart, and there's no rhyme or reason to these unless you know Greek and Latin. So that's about the best I can say on that one there. The most important ones you're going to see is mega and kilo. You might see micro, but not very often.
Yeah, Alex.
What's that?
Give me my charge for it. This is my
I'm not
total.
really hearing you very well.
I spoke a little bit of catching on the table. I need a paper towel.
Okay, I grab one off into the table.
Okay. Let's see. Let me get through
And
that.
there's the keys and machine will give me a charge.
Okay. Next is the voltage resistance flow. Basically, everything that we do in radio depends upon little electrons zipping along from one place to another.
I don't know.
Voltage is going to be just simply how much force there is pushing the electrons along. Current is just simply the amount.
Ray, we're getting background noise off your line.
Sorry.
And you have this very simple diagram here, V over IR. If you look at that, if you cover up V, you see IR. Current times resistance equals voltage. If you cover up the I, you see that it's voltage over resistance. We cover up the R, it's voltage over current. Very simple mnemonic to remember. Power is simply the amount of work. Again, the same type of little symbol, same thing that you do with that. You have DC current and you have AC current. DC goes just one way. Alternating current goes back and forth. Again, this is all basic. Direct current, you're going to either get it from batteries, and there's the different types of batteries, alkaline, zinc, carbon. Those are the most common ones, they're the cheapest. You have lithium batteries. They last longer. You have your lead acid batteries, and there's different types of those. Saturated lead acid batteries. You have deep cycle marine batteries. You have sealed lead acid batteries. and you have nickel, and then you have nickel, cadmium, and metal hydride and lithium ion batteries. They're all different types. You're not going to be tested on. Just know that they're out there, and which ones you use depends upon the application you're going to use. Then you have lithium iron phosphate batteries. These are now the gold standard. They're expensive. Today, at Batteries Plus, I looked at a 20 amp hour battery, and it's $269 for a 20 amp hour battery, 12.8 volts. The thing is, they're more expensive, but they last longer. You can discharge them more. So you actually get two batteries for the price for one compared to lead acid batteries. Lead acid batteries can go down to about 50% capacity before they are no longer usable on radios. Lead or lithium iron phosphate batteries can go down nearly to 100%, but they're more expensive. Okay, we've talked about this. Let me go down here. Ohm's law. Let's go that. Y'all saw this lovely little sine waves. Yeah. Okay, frequency. We got that. Okay. All right. Those are the basics. They're not going to be tested on those per se, but they will come up in the questions that you're asked. Now, there are 10 sub-elements that you have. They start with T1 rather than T0, but T0 is at the end. The first one you have is the commission's rules. And I'll tell you, two rules I was given. The first day is on active duty in the Navy, and they've always served me well. One, forget logic. Two, assume nothing. That is true with the commission's rules. They may have good reasons for them, but there's sometimes no rhyme or reason. You just have to memorize the rules. It's just like driving. There's certain things that you do. Why we do them is lost in the dark ages, but that's what we do. Okay, operating procedures, a lot the same way. Again, that's a lot of memorization because it's just how you're supposed to operate. Then you have radio wave propagation. That's where the science starts coming in. T4 is amateur radio practices. And again, this is how we do things, not necessarily scientific principles, but practices that we have that are to say that the social context of how we behave when we're using a radio. T5, electrical principles, and we covered some of those already. 6 is electronic and electrical components. These are all little parts that you'll find if you take your radio or whatever else apart. T7 is where we start putting all those components together into circuits. 8 is signals and emissions. It's more than just radio propagation. This is what the signals are. 9 is antennas and feed lines. What is a radio without an antenna? Anyone know?
Well, the heavier ones could be boat anchors.
Yep, a boat anchor. Got it. Because without an antenna, you're not going to get anything else. The antenna is what converts the electrical signal into a radio wave. Okay, then we get down to T0, and that's safety. And the general rule here is if it seems stupid, it probably is. Don't do it. So those are the 10 segments. And I might point out that there's only a few questions in each one. Okay. Now there's this handy little chart you can get from ARL. You can download it. It actually comes in several different forms. This shows all of the radio frequencies that amateurs can use, up to 1240 megahertz. There's actually more above that. And what's interesting about the ones that are above it is that they're open for technicians. Right now here in Spokane County, we're working on a system that will use the 5 gigahertz band. There's a 10 gigahertz band, and there's even higher bands that are available as well. Not very many people use those bands, but one of the things that amateur radio has always done is we've pioneered the use of radio frequencies at higher and higher frequencies. You have to understand that back in the day when we first started, you take a look over here on the left-hand side, you see 200 or 2200 meters or 630 meters. That was radio back in the day. When they first started doing amateur radio, those were the frequencies that were used. And as we progressed, we kept using shorter and shorter wavelengths. And you can read this chart. We've gone over. The important thing for you to know when you're operating is that where it says T, you can operate there. And if it's not, if the T isn't there, where that frequency where you want to operate, you can't operate there. And by the way, that's a great reason to go ahead and do general and then extra, because once you get extra, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can use it all. Okay. Are there any questions about the commission's rules? I don't want to go over anything that people don't need to be covered. And I can't see anybody, so someone will have to tell me. Are there any of the rules that you don't understand?
I mean, I don't remember the specific questions within each of the groups, but there's nothing I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay, well, yeah, with a lot of this, let me back up here for a moment. Have you been going using one of the available flashcard systems available online?
I've been doing the ham study.
Yeah, okay. That is probably the best way to do these. At least that's what I found for myself and with others that I've worked with. I didn't use Ham Study. I used hamexam.org. They have a flashcard system in there where you can specify exactly what you want to test on. Since we're down to the end, it's, I mean, just stick with what you've been using since you're familiar with it. But a lot of this is going to be by rote memorization. For example, this one here, the very first one, which of the following is part of the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service? The right answer is advancing skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. That has always been the purpose. It goes back to when amateur radio first started. What you had was, rather than the federal government saying, hey, we're going to need radio operators, and therefore we need to train people, they kind of palmed it off on the amateurs. They said, here, you go learn how to do this stuff. And then in case we ever need radio operators, we'll be able to pick you up and train you in what we need particularly, but you'll basically already know everything. And that is literally what they did in World War I and World War II. And in a lot of ways, they do that still today with ARES, RACES, and HCS. Y'all know the key thing, who rules amateur radio service? The FCC. And okay, here, the third one is, which phonetic alphabet do you use? You use the International Phonetic Alphabet. Now, everybody likes to put sometimes little twists on it. I know one person who loves giving his call sign. It's KJ7 and then goes on. Oh, it's Kilo Joker 7, and then he gives the rest of his call sign. No, don't do that. Use the International Phonetic Alphabet. Now, if you're in law enforcement, you're going to be schizoid because they don't use International Phonetic Alphabet. They use an entirely different one. For example, E, instead of being Echo, is Edward. They use first names. But if you don't use it, I guarantee you, when you start doing international DXing, people will not understand or be confused by what you're doing. You've got to use that international phonetic alphabet, and it's shown right here. Okay, you can only have one license, okay. And it used to be the FCC would mail you out an official copy of your license. Not anymore. It's all in the Universal Licensing System, that's ULS. I use it all the time. It's all public information. So when you appear in the FCC's ULS database, that's when it's official. You are now licensed. Then you get some definitions. What's a beacon? A beacon is where you're transmitting and it's for knowing what the propagation is, or it's for an experimental purpose. It's an amateur station transmitting communications for the purposes of observing propagation or related experimental activities. We can go into examples of that, but I don't want to spend the time. Okay, part 97, definition of a space station. More than 50 kilometers above Earth's surface. That's not quite high enough to get your astronaut wings, but because I think that has to be 70 kilometers above the Earth's surface. But it's an amateur station located more than 50 kilometers above Earth's surface. Usually those are satellites. The International Space Station is another one. Okay. Which of the following entities recommends transmit, receive channels and other parameters for auxiliary and repeater stations? A volunteer frequency coordinator recognized by local amateurs. And we have one here in Eastern Washington. And what they do is they sort of play traffic cop. If I wanted to set up a repeater, I'd go to the volunteer frequency coordinator and get a transmit and receive frequency. If it's on a VHF, it would probably be 600 kilohertz apart. On UHF, it's 5 megahertz apart. And that's so that the FCC doesn't have to get involved in that. It's all done voluntarily. Now, do I have to do what he tells me to do? Again, it's volunteer. No, I don't. But if I don't do what he says, I'm probably going to end up being kind of like the skunk at the picnic. No one's going to want to play with me. And who selects them? That's the next question. It's served by agreement of all the amateur operators in the area. Okay, RACES. This is one that kind of screws everybody up because they think, oh, RACES, it's an organization. No, it's not, but it's all of these. It's an emergency service. It's a service, not an organization. Number 11, when is willful interference in other radio stations permitted? No brainer on this one, at no time. You are never allowed to interfere with someone else's operation. So of those 11 questions, you'll be asked one of them. Which one? Who knows? But it will be one of those. Okay, sub-element B, T1B. We're talking about the frequency allocations. And they go through there and they listen, like, for example, this is a 10-meter band. It's from 28.3 to 28.5. That's just what was selected. Which amateurs may contact International Space Station on the VH bands? Any amateur operator holding a license, a technician or higher license, because VHF is a technician band. Which frequency is in the 6-meter band? 52.525. And the others are way out of 6 meters. Again, remember 6 meters. The easy way to figure that out is to remember that 300, which is actually mega meters per second, is the speed of light. 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz is equal to the wavelength. So you take 6 meters, divide it into 300, and you get 50. So somewhere around 50 is going to be the right answer. Which amateur band includes 146.52? Again, 146.52 divided into 300 comes up with about 2. Or you can just memorize the ARRL band plan. How many amateurs use the 219 to 220 megahertz segment of the 1.25 band? Or how many amateurs use it? And that's for fixed digital message forwarding systems only. Again, that goes back to the band plan. Is there a reason for that? Who knows? On which HF bands does a technician class operator have phone privileges? The 10-meter band only. Which of the following VHF, UHF band segments are limited to CW only? And they're listed there. 50 to 50.1 and 144 to 144.1. How are U.S. amateurs restricted in segments of bands where the amateur radio service is secondary? Well, when you're secondary, it means you come in second. That means if someone is there working on that frequency where you want it to be, you can't operate on that frequency. So that's what it means. Must avoid interfering with them. Okay, why should you not set your transmit frequency to be exactly at the edge of an amateur band or subband? Because it's too close to being out of band. And all the reasons there is correct. Any questions on this?
No,
What's that?
no, we don't have any questions.
Okay. Where may a single sideband phone be used in amateur bands of 50 megahertz? And at least some segment of all the bands.
So Frank,
Yes.
if folks don't have questions on the rules, maybe it would be advisable to
Well,
move
just
on to the
skip
next
it.
section.
Okay, well, I just wondered because they said they didn't understand it. Is there any other questions in the commission rules that you have questions about?
No,
Okay, then we'll go.
So I had one thought. I guess we should be looking at this band plan and kind of memorizing it, huh?
Well, yes and no. Depending on how you are going to operate. Now, to pass the test, there are certain questions which you have to know the answer to. But to be honest with you, once you pass the test, you don't need to remember them. Because unless you're going to operate, I mean, most of you with a technician license, you're going to get either a handheld radio or a little base station for VHF, UHF. Those are not going to be able to transmit on anything other than what you're allowed to operate on. Now, if you buy an ICOM IC7300 that can operate everywhere from 160 meters up to 50 meters, yeah, you better know the band plan. Because as an amateur, you can use it on 6 meters and you can use it on 10 meters, but you can't use it on anything else.
But on the test, they're asking you questions that kind of require knowledge of the band plan, do they not?
Yes, they do, particularly to those parts that pertain to technicians.
Okay,
That's what I'm getting at. There's only a limited part of that that you need to know.
okay.
And it's primarily where the technician can operate. All right. Okay. Okay, that's T1, which is primarily commission's rules. And like I said, a lot of that is just rote memorization. In a lot of cases, there's no rhyme or reason. You just have to know what the rules are. Operating procedures. We're talking here about operating your station, deciding what frequencies you're going to use, what you do when you call another station, and what type of thing you have for repeaters, for offsets and whatnot. Any questions on the station or operating procedures? Yes or no?
Not that I can think of.
So it's just all memorization, pretty much.
A lot of this is yes. There's no way around it. You know, like what is the common repeater frequency offset in the 70-meter band? It's plus or minus 5 megahertz. Duh. That's just what it is. And the other things like say the station's call sign, and identify with your call sign. That is basically just how you do it. It's like, Susie, I'm Frank. That's what you do with that. So, okay, but that's element 2. How do you operate? Radio wave propagation. This is where we will spend a lot of your time as an actual operator, either cursing or shouting hallelujah. Because propagation has so many variables that affect it. It's sometimes very difficult to know why or why not you're reaching somebody. And that's a lot of what they're talking about in this section right here. I know, like last night, we had the Spokane County Aries net, and we had one person who was on an HT, and he literally moved just a couple of feet and we could hear him. But his first location, he was all broken up. We couldn't understand him. Any questions about radio propagation? No questions? Okay.
Okay, Frank, why can't I hear you on 2 meters? That would be a good one.
Well, there could be a lot of reasons. You have to understand radio waves, first of all, is electromagnetic radiation. You have it in your microwave oven. You have it in your car radio. That's how you receive the messages and so on. And the question comes back to, first of all, how does radio waves get from one point to another? They go in a straight line, but they can also bounce off of other things. For example, some radio waves bounce off the ionosphere and come back down. Generally, that's the long wavelength where we have an HF. The other problem you have is sometimes you have the radio waves to go out in all directions. What happens when you have one radio wave that goes out one direction and then comes to your antenna, and another one that goes off another place, bounces off and comes back to your antenna? You have the same wave coming back by 2 different paths to come to your radio wave, your antenna. If they're not exactly in phase, guess what? They interfere with each other. There's also things like, for example, vegetation. There's a lot of radio waves that will actually be stopped by ordinary trees, by the leaves. So if you don't have your antenna up high enough so it goes over the trees or whatever, it's not going to get to the person that you're sending the message to, or vice versa. And that's what makes propagation such a frustration and also cursing. Because there's also times when you might sit there with your VHF radio and you're picking up Brazil. In fact, someone just recently was able to send a message from South America to Africa. First time it ever been done. And you say, well, gee whiz, they must have a really powerful radio. No, it just so happened that the atmosphere was just right. So that the radio waves, you sort of get up there and think of it as a tube that they could bounce in over to Africa. That's called ducting. It also happens between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So propagation, again, is one of those things that you have a PhD in physics and still not completely understand everything that's happening. I hope that thoroughly confuses you. And that, in fact, the last question down here, what effect does multipath propagation, that's what we were talking about, multipaths, more than one, have on data transmissions? Error rates are likely to increase.
So Frank, I had a much simpler answer for the question I asked. And that is, I'm too far away.
Well, that is another thing. VHF is generally, and I say generally, line of sight. But line of sight for radio waves is not exactly line of sight for ordinary light. Electromagnetic radiation, whatever it is, whatever frequency, can be bent. It's called refraction. Not reflection, refraction. And for example, normally VHF, if you look at the horizon, you're probably going to have an ordinary person, maybe a 6 to 8 mile distance before you hit the horizon. But radio waves are able to be slightly bent and they sort of go around the horizon a little bit. So you get like maybe a 20% increase in the distance. Another way that works is radar. The National Weather Service has a radar out here on the west side of Spokane, and it's a nice modern radar, really powerful. They sweep, they can see weather and everything else, except they can't see the weather down near the ground because the radar waves, as they go out, they get bent upward. So they don't see what's on the ground. That's why we have the weather or Skywarn system, so that people can tell them what's happening on the ground. Probably much more than what you want to know about radio waves and propagation. But there's a lot of things that can affect propagation, which is one of the reasons why we continually test our equipment. All right. Anything else on propagation? And by the way, seeing it bounce off the ionosphere, that's that picture right there. Okay. I don't know what else you want me to cover. And by the way, there's that little thing about the wave speed, which is we generally use just 300. It's not exactly right, but it's close enough. It is equal to frequency times wavelength. You can, in a lot of cases, memorize that equation and use that, or you can actually memorize the answers where you have to convert wavelength to frequency. Okay. The frequency range, you got to realize it's done in terms of what decades. For example, high frequency is 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz. Very high frequencies, 30 megahertz, 300 megahertz. Ultra high frequency is 300 to 3000. And then you get super high frequency. Guess what that is? That's 3000 megahertz to 30,000 megahertz or 30 gigahertz. It goes up. Actually, if you go down to 0.3 megahertz to 3 megahertz, that's medium frequency. You get below that, you get low frequency and then very low frequency. It's all done in decades. All right. Anything else on propagation?
Can you explain that sporadic E?
Sporadic E. That's a fun one. Basically, what you have is there are radio waves that'll bounce off barriers and like buildings, hills, airplanes. Now that's radar basically. But sporadic E, what that is that you'll have sometimes events in the upper atmosphere that create a layer or a location that is very rich in ions. These are atoms which either have an extra electron or one less electron than they're supposed to have to be neutral. And that forms sort of a mirror for the radio waves. So what you can do is you can bounce off those and you can reach someplace farther away than you normally would. And it's called sporadic because they're sporadic. How they occur or being able to predict that they occur is a very difficult thing to do. But you do have them occurring, and you know, if you're going to have a solar storm or like aurora borealis, or even has something that's akin to it, is a meteor scatter. A meteor going through the atmosphere heats up the air, that creates ions. That will also cause a scatter because it gives something for the radio waves to bounce off of. And they bounce off charged particles. And that's all that sporadic E is. You can't predict it. You can kind of have a rule of thumb when sometimes it'll occur, but that's not always reliable. Does that answer your question? Does that help you?
Yes.
Good. Okay. The second question there, the tropospheric ducting, that's what I was talking about, how you have a duct basically in the upper atmosphere. The radios go into that and they get bounced back and forth in that duct and they're kept there. That's the same way that optic fiber works with light.
So Frank, you have time for a ducting example?
Well, they have one right here. A ducting example,
No, it's a personal example.
a personal example.
Yes.
No, I don't. I've never been able to do that. It hasn't been
So
right.
let me tell you what I experienced. This
Go
was,
ahead.
this was where we were living in Astoria, and there was a fellow on the local repeater there that I was listening to and talking to, and I got him about half scale on the input. I said, "Well, do you want to move to simplex? Since I got you on the input." He said he did, and we moved over to 5.2 simplex, and he gave me his location. He was on a fishing boat. 600 miles north of the Canadian border and 1,000 miles out to sea. So as near as I can figure on triangulation, we have about a 1,200 to 1,250 mile QSO on simplex on 2 meter FM using atmospheric ducting.
Yeah, that happens, and it also happens with commercial stations. But again, the conditions have to be just right. You don't get very many people saying, "Oh, I've had dozens of events like that." Not unless they're all the time on the radio, and
It's only happened once.
yeah, once. Like I said, the communications between South America and Africa was done through ducting. And that, as I say here, it's caused by temperature inversions in the atmosphere. And normally as you get higher, it gets colder. But sometimes it's get turned around, and you can think of it as the air creates this barrier. Again, the radio waves can sense that and they bounce off of it. When it happens, it's magic. That's all I can say.
So I have another answer to Jim on the band plan question that he had earlier. I've been looking through I did a search for megahertz through the questions. The only ones where you really need to know the bands are the CW segments in the UHF, VHF bands. There's CD only segments. That's the one where you need to memorize that. And the other one is the what was it? Oh, the sideband segment in the 10-meter band for technicians. Those are the only two. And the rest of them can all be done by mathematics with the speed of light.
Yeah, 300 is equal to the frequency times the wavelength.
Does that help, Jim?
Come to sleep.
Well, I must have. Hey, Jim, was that okay? Did that help out?
Are you talking to me?
Yep, that was the question I had there. You were talking about studying the band plan. And there
Oh.
were two questions that were related to a band plan. Everything else on frequencies and meters you can do by mathematics. But just
Okay,
two of them have to be memorized. And that's the segment in the 10-meter band for the technicians. And it's the CW segments in UHF, VHF bands.
okay.
Those are normally right at the
National
bottom
call
head.
frequency. So. Okay. Nothing else on propagation. The amateur radio practices, there's two questions on this one here. And a lot of this, what you'll have here is it goes back to the technology that you're using. For example, which one is the appropriate power supply rating for typical 50-watt output mobile FM transceiver? 13.8 volts. That is a magic number. That is the ideal voltage for amateur radios. And then you have the amps, and that'll depend on the output power. Actually, if you multiply the 13.8 volts times 12 amps, it comes out to be a lot more than 50 watts. Because you have to have power in the radio just to be able to do its work. So that will become important when you want to set up a portable station. Don't think that 50 watts, and I got a thing here that has 400 watts, so it'll work for 8 hours. No, it won't, because the radio needs power just to do its work. SW meters or anything like that? Any questions here? Now, a lot of these questions, I can tell you that if you think about it, the answer should be obvious. For example, the T4A05. Where should an RF power meter be installed? In the feed line between the transmitter and the antenna. You wouldn't put it before the radio, can't do that. In fact, there's only one place it can go, and that's between radio and the antenna. So, what other questions do you have on this? Steve, I'm getting the impression that we're not being very effective here.
Okay, let's do a little more forcefully. Kathy and Steve, What's giving you the most trouble right now in your practice exams?
For me, it's really just like the some of the equations, I get them mixed up.
Yeah,
Like
that's
the-
confusing.
The pi, the one that was pi p equals I times e, and then remembering which ones are which symbols. I get those mixed up sometimes. So I'll divide instead of multiply or something like that.
Okay, for those, if we go back to the very beginning, those triangles, I think are the best way to think about those. They will help you keep it all straight. I gotta get my,
Let me give you one more, Kathy. You can remember the E because voltage ends in the E.
Okay.
Yeah, just like with current being I, to me, that's not natural. So
Nope.
I get them mixed up. So,
unfortunately, what you're dealing with here is history. V, I, and R are what were used when they first started studying electricity, and why they used I, that's lost in the past. It's just right now tradition to use I for current.
and some of the questions will say, you know, like, I don't remember the exact questions, but it'll say, what's the resistance? And then another one might say ohms. So
Yep.
it'll use, sometimes it'll use the resistance, sometimes it'll use ohms, or sometimes it'll say current, and sometimes amps. And then I forget that they're the same thing. Like I get,
And
mixed up.
unfortunately, that's just something that you have to get. It's kind of like, think of this, you're learning a foreign language. And the only way you really learn a foreign language is by practicing with it and repetition. And so that is what you got to do with these as well. But I'd say there's three equations that you really need to know for this exam. One is V equals IR. That's this little triangle I'm showing right here on the screen. And again, you take the one that you want to find, cover it up, and then you see how the two equate to that. Then you have, I gotta get down here, come on. My computer's slow. Power is equal to the current times the voltage. That's the second equation that you need to know. And what I would recommend that you do, and because this is what I did back when I was in college, is get a big pad or a stack of scrap paper and write them out. And then write them out again and again and again, you know, the old thing like, you know, I will behave in class, you know, write it down 50 times. Do that with these equations. The third equation is that the speed of the light or electromagnetic is equal to the frequency times the wavelength. Those three equations are going to answer most every question that you have that involves any type of calculation. Does that help?
yes.
So I'll offer one other test-taking hint that may or may not help you, Kathy. Number one is when you start taking the exam, I don't know if you've mentioned this before, but the exam is a closed book exam. So you cannot go in to the exam with any notes or books or anything. You can only go with the knowledge that's in your head. Okay. However, you are allowed a piece of scratch paper. And so the exam team will work with you if you would like to use a piece of scratch paper. We will ask you to show us that it's blank on one side and the next, okay, when you get started taking the exam. But you're not required to start answering questions when we start the exam. What we recommend people that are visually oriented is to, when you get started, don't start answering the questions. When we say go ahead and start the exam. Don't start answering the questions. Take your scratch paper and write down on the scratch paper all your cheat notes. Everything you've memorized before, these formulas, these diagrams, the three equations that Frank is talking about. Go ahead and write them on the scratch paper. Okay, and then you can start answering questions. When you get to a question that involves Ohm's law, for example, you've got that formula or diagram there on your scratch paper, and that can help guide you through the question. Okay, so you can't walk in there with any cheat sheets or any papers pre-filled out. But there's no reason why, when we say start the exam, there's no reason why you have to immediately jump into the questions. Then you get distracted. Then you get to one of the questions that involves a formula and you start freaking out because you can't remember exactly what the formula is. When you're taking practice tests, just get into the rhythm that you say, oh, I'm going to start my practice test, and then practice writing out the questions before you actually start answering the questions. You know, write down all your notes on the scratch paper.
That's an excellent suggestion. And I might also add that you can also put down there a few other things that you might need to memorize. For example, national calling frequency.
Right.
Or whatever it is that you have a hard time remembering, practice sort of making up your own little cheat sheet right there on the spot so that you can regurgitate it when you start the exam, and then you have it there. I know that
when you finally get to the question, you have the cheat, you have your scratch paper that you've already written down notes to yourself. Okay. So the only thing, you can't pre-write that out. That's not what an open book exam is. So, but there's no reason why you can't write that out from memory at the start of the exam before you start getting into the questions. Okay, and depending on your test taking skills, you might find that helps you in your memorization.
very good.
I find that helpful because, you ask if I have any questions about the content that you're laying out. And to be honest, I don't know enough to have questions about that. Since I have no practical knowledge or experience, I'm reduced to test taking skills and memorization. So basically, my goal is to memorize 430 questions and answers.
You can do that.
And by process of elimination, going through if there are 4 possible answers, just taking skills to try to eliminate as many as possible and guess between the others. That's all I know how to do at this point, because I don't know anything really about the science behind this, or it's still a matter of memorizing as far as I'm concerned at this point.
That's not uncommon. But let me put it, yes, your test taking skills are important. You can usually eliminate at least 2 of the answers on any question. So you're down to at least a 50-50 chance. And the thing that you need to do is work on, well, first of all, let me put it this way. This is where the flashcards I found to be very useful. I don't know about Ham Study, but I'm pretty sure that they have the same things that hamexam.org has. You're doing the flashcards, they'll go through and tell you how many right you got on a given element. And when I was preparing for my exams, and that was all 3 of them, I'd go through a given element until I was at least getting 90% every single time I went through them. Then I'd go on to another element and work on that until I got 90%. Then I'd go back and do an exam and make sure that I kept up that 90%.
So just remember that getting your amateur radio license is like getting your first driver's license.
Yes.
When you when you were asked to fill out, to answer the written part of your driver's exam, you probably had no idea what they were talking about when they said a controlled intersection. I mean, you just kind of learned it by rote. And then over the years, contrary to what a lot of teenagers think, they think that they passed the test, that they know everything about driving. You know that it's a matter of experience in different driving environments, and you get better and better and better. It isn't like you were a perfect driver when you got your driver's license. And that's a similar thing with amateur radio. When you get your technician license, you're just starting out. The exam is designed to have everybody have the same level playing ground. So you have a little bit of the same vocabulary, you have a little bit of the same background as far as what's the questions on the exam. And then over time, you will get better and better and better as you talk to other hams, as you run into problems with your rig and you solve the problems that you're trying to solve. You'll get better. It's a lifetime learning experience. And so technician exam, however you get through the exam is perfectly fine with us. You can memorize it. You can try to learn it from root science. I had one student who had an eidetic memory, and the way she learned the question is she went and read every question in the question pool on a 70-page printout that she did for every question, so that she knew the answer to every question. That's how she studied. However you study, that you can pass the test is perfectly fine. And one other hint, there's only 412 questions in the question pool, so you already know a couple more that you didn't think that you knew just 5 minutes ago. There's only 412.
And I agree. Yeah, I agree with Jim. The challenge, I think, for us new people that are not, like, I'm not scientifically inclined, so it is a lot of memorization. And so even in some of these classes, when you say, well, it's obviously not that answer, it's not obvious to me, so I mean, I know to people that are smarter than me, it's obvious, but to like somebody that doesn't know anything about this stuff, none of them seemed obviously not that question. So
then you should have spoken up and said, well, why isn't this question the right one? And we would have been, hopefully we would be glad to share with you why something is both the right and the wrong answer. We tried to focus on what the right answer was so that we didn't distract you from the other 3 questions that are on the exam. But
And let me also say, as I said before, think of this as a foreign language. Don't, for example, it's like trying to learn, I tried to learn German. I took 3 years in high school, 1 year in college, and a semester in graduate school. And to this day, all I can say is, "Wo ist das Toilette?" and "Wie geht es Ihnen?" I'm terrible on foreign languages. I managed to pass, but I did it through memorization and just repetition and working on it. Same thing with these. The one reason why they provide all the questions and the answers is because they don't want to make this impossible. You don't have to have a PhD in electrical engineering to pass, but you do just have to know what the right answers are.
Hey, Kathy, do you speak any French? Kathy, do you speak any French?
For me, no.
I just put the French
j'ai étudié
translation.
français à l'université.
So
I
in
have
chat,
no
I
idea
just
what you just said.
put the French translation for current, which is where it came from. So if you can remember, the French translation is intensity decurrent. And I don't have the foggiest idea if that's the correct
I
pronunciation.
did take French. I was my second major in college.
Not mine.
I'll tell you what, if you can learn French, you can do this.
I'm currently learning Spanish, so that's
gosh.
fun.
Now you bring back bad memories for me, because I took Spanish for 1 summer And unfortunately, when they did the boys against the girls in that class, I lost the game for the boys. So, okay. I do want to leave time for the other topic, which was the FCC ULS. Now, let's see, we've done, who's the other one that was here? What was, not Jim. There's two students that were on the line, if I remember right. Who's the other one?
Kathy and Steve here.
Okay, Steve. Steve, Kathy told us what was her problem. What is yours? What are you having difficulty with?
That is definitely similar to Kathy. I think the advantage Kathy has right now is she's been, and I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I missed one or two of the classes because of work. So I'm sort of like tonight, I actually got a little bit more understanding just by hearing, because I heard some of this stuff before. So for me, it's reinforcement. So I know I gotta sit down and really just cram it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah. It's like I said, it's like learning a foreign language. What do you do the night before you take an exam? Your first year in a foreign language? You cram. So
Yeah, and that's my goal. Like we were just talking about before class tonight. I said, we got a 7-hour drive home. I'm like, I know what we're gonna be doing is questions. and 7 hours of hearing that stuff, it helps. And then
Yeah.
you do a little more reinforcement later. That's for me how to study. I study weird. I'm not but like hearing this stuff today was reinforcing some of what I've heard before, which I was like, oh yeah, I remember the guy talking about this, or I remember this. So yeah, I mean, it is just going to be studying.
all right. Well, then, if you don't have any specific questions on any of the materials,
Frank, let's ask Jim the same question.
oh, I thought we did.
Yeah,
Well,
what's hanging him up the most?
Well, I tend to think about what, I don't have that many problems with. So I got the regulations down pretty well, I think. I have some prior knowledge. Actually, I held a novice license back when I was 10 years old. So the schematic diagrams, like what you have up here, I know those components. I think what's caused me a lot of problems is this, I got the antenna stuff down pretty well. The whole business about, what frequencies and what wavelengths are good for doing what things, things that you guys know about because you've worked with it. I have no way of kind of getting a handle on that.
Yeah, I can sympathize with that. And again, it goes back to, how does a kid, a baby, learn a language?
Just listen to people talk. I mean,
they imitate them. It's a case of, just keep trying until, hey, you start understanding that, hey, if I say mama, that one that feeds me comes to me. If I say dada, it's the other one.
mhm.
You don't know what the difference is, but hey, this one comes and feeds me, and this one here, comes and says, hi, kid. And the same thing with all this. It's a case of just getting in there and looking at those. I like the flashcard method of doing this because one, it forces my mind to go back and through it over and over again. And I find that the way to learn, especially when I don't know anything and I can't put it into an organized framework. If I can put it into an organized framework, not a problem. Then I could use the rules and figure out the answers. But when it doesn't go into an organized framework, then I've got to memorize.
I will say that I started doing what Frank had said in Ham Study, where I initially was doing all the questions in the study mode, and I kept getting all mixed up. And then I finally said, okay, I'm going to just do T1. And I waited till I got over 90% aptitude. And then I went to T2 until I got to 90. and T3. So I started going through each one individually, and it started sinking in more than trying to do all of them mixed together.
Yeah.
So it started making a little more sense.
And the other thing is, it helps to go back and then do a review by using the flashcards of which you've already quote mastered. So it stays current, because otherwise it decays. That's actually been proven in studies. If you don't keep renewing it, keep using it, you lose it. I know my granddaughter early this year, she was really primed for a technician. She's going to take Jack Tilley's class, and the night before she came down and tested positive for COVID. And so it was like she had to wait, and she was surprised. I mean, she was doing like better than 90% on the flashcards. So she ended up having to do it like a month later. But during that month, she didn't study as hard. And so when she went and took the exam, she passed. But she was basically a nervous wreck by the time she was done, because there's some of it that she forgot. So yes, do those flashcards, do one little bite at a time, and I think you'll do well. And I noticed that there's a misspelling here on this page. Okay, any other questions? Anything, any topic in particular? Well then,
Don't have anything.
Just a little feedback. The format here doesn't, and by that I mean just giving the correct answer. Just the way I'm planning on approaching the test probably doesn't help me as much as showing all the answers and kind of doing the process of elimination thing, because that's the way I'm approaching the questions.
yeah.
Because I don't know the right answer. I don't know why the right answer is the right answer. I'm just trying to eliminate the wrong answers, basically.
That is another valid approach. I know that people do that. Here in Spokane County, with Jack's class, we do the right answer. Other people do all of them and then show you what the right answer is. It's just a different approach to it. This is what we use here in Spokane County, like I said. The other approach is not wrong. This one is not wrong. It's just different.
Dave's got a completely different approach that he's working on his class right now. And what I like to do is get feedback from the participants in our class to see if this made sense to them or if it was helpful. And this feedback will help us make decisions on how to format our next classes. Dave, you're muted.
So do you want me to describe what our philosophy is, or do you?
Yeah, go ahead, because I want to throw that idea out and see if the students would think that would have made a bit of difference. I don't want to say, hey, we did a wrong job, because they're just different philosophies. But if that would have been generally more helpful to them.
So, so the way we teach our technician courses is it's all concepts. We do show some questions, but only those questions that we think help express the concepts that we're trying to do. So we do not go over every question in the question pool. We expect the students to do that on their own with some kind of drill and practice tool, such as hamstudy.org or hamtest online or ham radio prep, or there's a good dozen different drill and practice tools that are out there. So what we do with electronics is we talk about Ohm's law. We give some tricks that we've developed, some visual tricks for people to help do their calculations. We go over some questions and some answers, but only where the questions reinforce what the concepts are focusing on. And we do that to make sure that you have a background enough to be able to go into the detailed question pool and read the question pool. So we basically say we do an hour and a half worth of instruction, and then we recommend students do another half hour of drill and practice with their favorite tool. And we do our topics in the same order that our drill and practice tool does the material. So unlike here, we took topic 1, which is commission rules, then we did topic 2, then we did topic 3. The online drill and practice tool that we recommend students use does not do it that way. They start off with electronics and they start off with Ohm's law. So we do things in an order that is directly in line with our drill and practice tool. So as a student, you're expected to do both drill and practice between classes, also attend the classes, and the classes focuses on concept and tips and tricks to help you become comfortable with the basic concepts in each one of the units. So
What
ahead.
we tried to do with this class is we tried to pair the more intense topics, higher amperage, I'm sorry, with the ones that like the rules or the practices or things like that. We were pairing those. So you had one that was really technical and one was not so technical. That's what we were trying to do on the pairings. That is similar to the way my county does it when they do theirs. And they do a Friday for 2 hours, Saturday for about 4 hours, Friday for 2 hours, and then I review, and that's all the longer their class is. And they go through all this. They concentrate quite a bit on practice tests, and they actually have printed out forms that, practice exams that people can take in class, and then they go over those. So there's a number of different methods, and we tried to use one that we thought would get over for the class fairly well, and that's what we chose. And is it right or wrong? Nah, that's probably not the right question. Was it helpful? That's up to you folks to tell us.
And Steve, I might also point out that, for example, Dave Kessler has an excellent video series on YouTube for each of the license classes, where he does go over each one of the topics and explains the concepts.
Right, but he doesn't go over the question pool in great detail.
No, he doesn't.
So that's ultimately where we got our idea, is listening to Dave Kessler and saying, hey, look, we need to focus more on concepts to kind of bring everybody up to the same level. And then the drill and practice tools that are now online do a much better job than we do as far as the actual questions that are in the question pool.
Yep, it's just a different approach.
Okay, so I'd like to get the answers out of Kathy and Steve and Jim at this point.
Well, I mean, I can say I could see a benefit of a combination of the two. For me personally, what would help me, because I do a lot on my own. Now, I can't speak for Steve. We have totally different learning styles. However, for me, like for the first lesson, if we were going to do T1 and T2 for the first class, if I knew ahead of time and you said, okay, I want you to go in a ham study and I want you to go through all the questions in T1 and T2 in your ham study, and then we come in and go over the questions, then I would at least have some advanced knowledge and know, like Jim was saying, we don't know what we don't know. If we actually read through them and said, okay, I get this, but I didn't get this, then I'm more prepared to ask questions. But when we go through the questions really fast and I'm not really comprehending them, because I'm also an editor, I have to read things like questions 2 or 3 times and then read all the answers 2 or 3 times before I answer something. that's how I take a test. So we're just running through the questions and answers really fast. It doesn't sink in for me, whereas, I mean, Steve is more visual, so for him, it probably sinks in faster. But if I had self-study in advance, it would actually help me come more prepared. Now, he probably would say he wouldn't like that. But go ahead, you can say your method.
No, I think that like the other gentleman was saying, I agreed with him. I appreciate everything you're all doing, by the way. This has been really helpful. But like for me, I'm more conceptual where I got to see things to understand them anyway. I'm more visual. As my wife said, I agree. And I'm also severely ADHD, so add that to this makes it wonderful. But I think having a little bit of background somehow, and I kept saying, I think during the course even, I said, I wish they would explain a little bit more about it, not just here's the answer. And I know that's part of the reason is to get the license, but at the same time, like, well, I don't understand it, why or this. And I'm like, and part of it is me not opening my mouth, but I think other part of it is, it was like, it didn't make sense. So, I mean, slowly, like today, I started putting some of this together, which was interesting for me.
Let me add one thing, that you'll discover in amateur radio, every time you think you've got it all understood and everything else, and then you'll take a look at one other area and one little thing, and then you'll discover that, oh my gosh, there's this huge area that is involved in that. There's a whole new world out there. And I can tell you that I'm still learning things about amateur radio. And not to brag or anything, but I've got a PhD in physics. I've done electromagnetic, I've taken, graduate level courses in electromagnetic radiation and everything else. And I still learn new things about radio and propagation and all the stuff that associated with it every day, because it is a huge, just tremendous topic. And if you don't like one aspect of amateur radio, believe me, there's a lot of that you can get into. So you'll never stop learning. You'll never know enough. That's the other thing.
I always like to say that anyone who thinks that they know it all doesn't know nearly as much as they need to.
No. Okay, well, Steve, I know that you want to cover the FCC ULS. So I think I'll leave it at this and turn it back to you.
Sounds good. Well, I'm going to kick that one back over to Dave because he's going to talk about registration, which you have to do before your test. So you got to identify yourself to the FCC. So you
Okay,
have that
Steve,
little
I'm gonna
magic
leave.
number.
I've got an exam session. I'm going to go help Proctor.
Okay, thank you.
Alrighty, so hopefully I can share my screen here. There it does. And go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so hopefully everyone can see the screen with a screenshot on it. Okay, so to be able to take your exam requires you to pre-register with the FCC so the FCC knows who you are. And we keep using this term FRN without describing it, which is the FCC user number, registered user number. And so it's 10-digit number that you'll need to put on all your paperwork. In days gone past, the FCC would accept your social security number, but nowadays they are concerned about privacy. So you still need to provide your social security number, but you give it to the FCC, you don't give it to us when you take your exam. In days gone past, you filled out a registration form with your exam team and you would give your social security number there. which meant that anyone who was a volunteer examiner also knew what your social security number was. So they stopped that practice by requiring people to register online. So the URL that kicks everything off is fcc.gov/ULS. This is a two-step process. First step is to create an account, and then the second one is to create a number. So the first one is to create an account. So from their home screen for the ULS, you see a new user registration link towards the top of the page. You click on that, and that takes you to the login screen. If you've not done this before, you first have to create an account. You do that by clicking on the register button that has you create a username. And when you do that, they basically ask you for a username, which must be an email address. The FCC is going to use that email address for all communications. So you register an email address and you give it a password. Make sure you remember that password because the FCC does not make it easy for you to change it later on. So please remember your password and put it in some place that you have that you can easily remember it. And that's pretty much it with the account. The account just wants to know your name, a email address, and that's pretty much it. Okay. And this account is then used for you to interface with the Federal Communications Commission. So if they came out tomorrow with some FCC petition to change the rules and regulations, and you wanted to make a comment on that petition, you would log into your account and then go in and make your comment. So it's more than just licenses. It's any dealing with the Federal Communications Commission, you're going to need an account and an FRN number. Okay. So once you create that account, the system will then email to the email address that you gave as the username. It will email you an activation record with a link on the email, and you click on that, and that then activates your account. Now you know the username and password. This is what the email kind of looks like, has all these embedded numbers in them. And so once you have that username and password, now you can go back to that same login page and enter in your username and password and log in to the system. When you log into the system, this is where you're presented with all of the normal operations that you would deal with the Federal Communications Commission, not with your license, but with the FCC in general. And it doesn't seem that straightforward, but you want to click on the third option down that says register a new FRN. That's what you want to click on to get started to get the FRN number. I just want to point out that there's also this bills and fees option on this menu. That's where you can go to pay your $35 application fee. So you may come back to the same screen after you pass your exam and you're ready to pay your $35 application fee with a credit card. You'll come back and click on that bills and fees. The wizard then walks through a couple of simple questions. The first question is, are you registering as a business entity or as an individual? You want to click on individual. That's not the default. The default is a business entity, so you're going to want to change that to be an individual. And then the second question is actually a trick question. To be able to get a license, you must have a contact address that's in the United States. You're not required to be a United States citizen, but you are required to have an address that can be delivered by the United States Postal Service That's the way the FCC ensures that anybody who is given a license, that the FCC can contact them by mail if they ever have if they ever have a complaint issued against them, or if a fine is ever initiated, they need to be able to contact you. So that's what they're going to use your mailing address for. So you must say yes to the second question, that you have a contact address in the United States. Then it will say, well, what kind of FRN number do you want? And you want a Coors FRN number. That's the default, but that's the one that you want. And then it will go through and ask for your address, and it will ask your Social Security number. Even if you don't have the Social Security number, you can use a taxpayer identification number. So if you're a registered alien here in the United States, you can use your TIN rather than your Social Security number. And if you have none of those, you can say, oh, I am a non-US citizen, in which case you say the reason why you don't have a Social Security number is you can say that you're a foreign national, and you're not required to be a US citizen to get a United States license. So you fill all of this information out, and then you hit submit at the bottom. I blanked out my Social Security number and addresses and things like that. And then your next page will say, here's your FRN number. And this is a 10-digit number. It's a sequential increasing number. You need to write that down. So write down that FRN number, that 10-digit number, and then you can use that when you go to your online exams and you find an exam that you want and you click on the register button. One of the pieces of information that they're going to ask you is what's your FRN number, and you give them that 10-digit number that you got off of the page. If for some reason you forget your FRN number with your last name, you can do a search to be able to see if you can figure out what your FRN number is, but it's pretty limited. We suggest just write it down, save that, print off that page, whatever it takes to have you remember your FRN number. For me, I can never remember my FRN number. I always go back to my license, and on my license, I have my FRN number and I copy it from there. So I always remember my call sign because that's what I'm constantly using on the air is my call sign. And from that, I can look up your license. So let me just show you, I just wanted to show one other thing here. So here you can type ULS, and it always comes up as a first hit on Google. And here's that same page that we talked about. If you're going to be here, I think it's next week, where I'm going to talk about the license manager and how to manage your license once you do pass your exam and get licensed. We're going to be clicking on this file online option over here to go into the license manager, but we won't do that today. But towards the bottom of the page, this is where you can check and look up somebody's license. So you can go here, search license, look up AE7TD. And there's me. And you can check to see what your license was. So you actually use that ULS page a lot for looking up licenses, if that's the way you want to do it. There are other ways to look up call signs. But for here, we'll look at just the FCC way of doing things. Any questions? Jim, I think you've already done it because you're signed up for our exam this coming Monday. Kathy and crew, have you guys signed up for any sessions, for any exam session yet?
No, just you had mentioned the one at the last one, I think September 28th or something like that.
Yes, 28th.
Is it when you had asked us about, or the 26th?
Yeah, the 26th is
Okay.
the one that we have. That's the one that Jim is in. And then we have one September 30th, the Friday, and we have one October 2nd. So the way to look that up is to go to ham.study/sessions.
So you have a semicolon in there.
Where's my phone? I can tell you which one I can do.
So you can just look at ham.study/sessions/AE7TD, my call sign, /online.
You got a typo there. Go back, hit your back button.
And then this lists all of the sessions that our team does it. There's the one on Monday. That's the one Jim signed up for. One on Friday evening, Pacific time, and one Sunday afternoon, Pacific time. All right, and then you click on the session you want. And then all the way at the bottom, there's a register button. And then this wizard will then you want to say, well, I'm testing for a new license. And then you can go in and register on the to take the exam.
Okay, so you said to do the FCC first before doing this?
Yes, you need to get your FRA number before you register. It's because it's a required field on the registration.
So if I sign up for that same one, how does it work? Is it like, are you looking at multiple students at once, or?
So we typically have 3 or 4 testing teams that each have 3 or 4 VEs in each one. We use Zoom breakout rooms. So when you come in, I'll welcome you to the session. I then move you off into a Zoom breakout room that has Jane and a couple of other folks that do pre-check. So we check to make sure your computer is configured properly. We do a quick scan of your room to make sure you have a movable camera. We will check to make sure that you have a government issued photo ID with you, like a driver's license or a passport. And then we will move you over into a testing room, again, which is a Zoom breakout room. And you will share your screen and then go to a website, hamstudy. It's like Hamstudy, done by the same group. So it looks very much like the hamstudy.org practice tests. And you'll take that online while sharing your screen. And your camera has been turned on, since like now, all your video is shared, right? Just like me right now. And so we can see you and we can hear you while you're answering the exam, which is like taking a practice test in a browser.
So Dave, sometime between now and Monday, we'll get an email that has the Zoom link and such in it to be able to get started.
Yes, we've had a history of Zoom bombers trying to discover our account, our Zoom meetings. So we saved that to the day before.
Okay.
So probably Thursday or Friday, you'll receive an email from me that says, this is what the timeline looks like. And if you're not able to make it, please be respectful of your other people that are taking the exams and open up your slot as soon as you can. And then you'll get an email from me the day before with the Zoom information for you to join the Zoom session. Okay, and then you join the Zoom session, and from there on, we'll walk you through it. After you register and you pay your $10 or you request a fee, like Jim already has a final registration email from me, and on there's a pointer to all the rules and regulations, and we walk you through a sample installation, and we say you must have at least one movable camera, and also all the rules and regulations will be talked about in a document that's available to you in the email that I send you to say the registration is complete after you've paid your money.
What do you mean by a movable camera?
So one of the things we do is we need to make sure that you don't have any crib notes or any information in the exam that you can see that we can't. So what we will do is we will ask you to take your camera and hold your laptop or hold your camera up and rotate it around the room. We'll ask to see the ceiling. We'll ask to see the floor. So it needs to be a movable camera. It cannot be permanently affixed to the monitor. There are some iMacs, for example, that the camera is physically attached to this great big, 20-pound monitor, and we do not allow people to pick that up in their arms and rotate around the room. So if you have a laptop with a webcam, if you have a desktop station with a webcam that sits on top of the monitor, then you can take it off the monitor and you can rotate it around to show us what's in the room. We can ask you, well, what's on that pile over there? Could you please clean up that table over there? Things like that. If there's any electronic monitors in the room, if there's a TV in the room, we'll ask you to cover it so that you can't remotely turn it on and then use that as a aid while you're taking the exam. If all of that fails, then you can join the session with your phone, and we can use the camera that's on your phone as your movable camera. So for some people that have that issue, they can use a phone. And if the only thing you have available is a phone or a tablet, as our last option, we can have you use it also to take the exam on the phone. We usually don't like doing that because the screen is so small. We feel like it's not helpful for the candidate. So the rules and regulations say that you have to have a normal computer to be able to take the exam. But we've done exams in some pretty crazy places. Well, I had one service member that took his exam sitting out on board his ship. He kind of found a little cubby hole topside outside, and he used his phone, and that's how we took his exam. So we can get pretty unusual in what people, sometimes can do. But does that answer your question, Kathy? Will that be an issue for you?
No. I mean, I'll be using a laptop.
Okay, that's fine. As long as if it's this computer that you have here, it's a fine camera. So that you could use that on a laptop, and you just rotate the laptop around, and we see the room that you're in, we see the ceiling, we see the floor, and things like that.
And you said last week, I believe, that there's no time limit.
It's more a reasonableness time limit. It's only 35 questions. We start to get nervous if people take longer than an hour to take a 35-question exam. But 20 minutes, a half hour, even 45 minutes, you're fine. If it takes you longer than an hour to do a 35 question, then we probably need to have a discussion beforehand to see if you're really ready to take the exam. So
It's going to take me an hour just to clean my house so that you'll let me take the exam.
that's what I
I'm with
will
Jim on that one.
will mention our preferred place to take an exam is in a bathroom. I'm dead serious. I'm dead serious. Our preferred place in the house is to take it in a bathroom. It's a small, constrained environment. We don't have to worry about papers and things like that. When you get our rules and protocols, we recommend that people take the exam in a bathroom. So I know that sounds funny, but that is best test taking place that's in your house.
Well, at least you don't have to take a break to go to the bathroom.
No comment.
You're already there.
So unless you have some medical issues, by the way, once you start the exam, you start the exam. There's no.
Jim, they did say that we have microphone on, so I don't know if you want to be doing that. Maybe hearing everything.
Okay, other questions?
Thanks, Dave.
Any other exam questions that we can answer? So what are your plans for a calculator? Jim, what's your plans for a calculator?
A calculator is going to be my scratch pad and a math. I don't have a calculator. I'm
Okay,
not planning on having a calculator.
okay. You are welcome to use the online calculator that comes with the operating system. You can't use another app. You can't use a calculator app beyond whatever comes with the operating system. So if you're on a Windows machine or a Mac, you can use the simple calculator and you share it on your desktop, and then we can see it. So we know that we know exactly what you're doing. If you need a physical calculator, then it has to be a particular type. So you obviously won't need it. Kathy and crew, what are your plans for a calculator?
I don't recall any questions that required too much math beyond paper. Am I missing something?
No.
Okay.
It's mostly a comfort level. It's mostly a comfort level that people like using calculators only to be able to double check their memory and doing things by paper. So it basically comes down to a confidence level. You're right. Most all the exams, 30 divided by 3, 2 times 15 is probably the most actual math that you will do. So 10 amps multiplied by 13.8 amps is 138 volts. So maybe a little fraction calculation, but that's about it. That's the most complicated. On the technician exam, it gets much more difficult on the general, and it's pretty advanced on the extra level exam. So most people.
Let's get through the first one.
Yeah, there's no square roots on the technician exam. There is on the general exam. All righty. Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, if you don't need a calculator, that's perfectly fine. We like that. That's one less thing that we have to worry about when we have people taking the exam. We get nervous when people look away from the screen. So just in case you're wondering what the volunteer examiners are doing, they're looking at you while you're taking your exam. They're looking to see where your eyes are looking. They want to see if you're always looking into a particular area of the room where you may have something posted that we can't see out of your camera. So we usually tell candidates that when they're taking the exam, please look straight ahead. And if you have to use your scratch paper, to look down at your scratch paper, before you do that, please tell us that verbally. Say, I'm reaching for the scratch paper. I'm done with my scratch paper, so that when we see you look away from the screen, we know what you're doing. So just verbally tell us that if you're going to use a lot of scratch paper work. Okay. Any other questions? Already. So one thing I will tell you is that the candidates queue up. So when you come in for early check-in, you get into a queue. So the longer you wait before you come in, the later you are in the queue. And as I said, we typically do 8 to 12 candidates at a time in 3 or 4 different testing Zoom breakout rooms. So sometimes it can be a little bit of a wait before you actually get into the testing room if you check in a little later in the cycle. Okay.
Okay, then I might not do Monday because I do have something that night, and so I'll look at the other, I'll look
October
at the other
2nd.
days.
So yeah, that's fine. And that's just with our testing team. So let me put into the chat. So again, the link for our team is so that's the link for our testing team. However, we are all part of the Greater Los Angeles Amateur Radio Group as far as, so if you go to any of these sessions, that will list all of the GLARG sponsored sessions. So that's, for example, every Saturday night Pacific time, they always have an online exam every Saturday night. So if you can't make Friday with us or a Sunday with us and you want to do a Saturday night, that GLARG session is always available to you every week. Alrighty. So just briefly, what will happen is after you pass your exam, we will give you a certificate that says that you passed your technician exam. We'll email that to you. And we will then submit your paperwork to the FCC. Then you need to go into the FCC and pay your $35 application fee. That's where I circled that one option that said pay your bills and fees. You'll see a $35 fee has been posted to your FRN number, and you go in and pay your $35, and then they issue you a call sign. Once you have a call sign, then you can transmit. You can't transmit until you get the authorization from the FCC, and that means getting a call sign. That's when
Okay,
you
we'll know if we passed right away, though.
can know that right away.
Okay.
Okay, and then the team will walk you through the steps for paying your $35 application fee. Okay, and then we submit your paperwork. If it's on Friday or Sunday, your paperwork goes in on Monday. You'll probably get an email from the FCC about paying your $35 either late Monday or on Tuesday. You have 10 days to pay your fee, or the FCC will dismiss your application with no action taken on it. And you'll have to come back to your session manager and reapply and pay another $10 exam fee. You don't have to take the exam again, but you will have to go through the administration to get your paperwork to be resubmitted. So we really want to encourage people to pay their $35 within those first 10 calendar days. Okay. And then the next day or the 2 days after you pay your $35, you'll get an email from the FCC saying that your paperwork has been processed, and you have a call sign, and then they will, that same email will have a link to the FCC systems that will allow you to download a PDF that is the official copy of your license. That will have your call sign on it. It'll have a watermark that says official copy. They used to mail you the official copy of your license. They no longer do that. They send you an email with a link to a PDF file on their system. And that's what you get as the official copy of your license. All righty.
Thanks, Dave. I got to roll.
Very
So-
good.
We'll see you Monday.
See you Monday.
All right. Thank
Yeah, I
you.
think that about covers it. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Say 73. Bye-bye.
So Dave, I've got a question about one of your slides last night.
Sure.
You showed a picture of a simple circuit with a battery and a switch and a light.
Yep.
The light had a standard screw base that looked like an AC light on a DC circuit.
Well, treat it like it's I know.
And
It's
it was two connected to the sides of the thing instead of one connection to the side, one connection to the bottom.
what can I say? That was stolen. That was
Gotta give me
stolen.
gotta give me bad time.
ARL, old ARL license course.
Anyway, thank you for helping out tonight.
Sure. Take care. 73.
Okay. Ray, I guess that's it.
All righty, I'm gonna spend the next hour processing video and have it ready soon. Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Hey, you can cut that last comment off about his video.
Oh, but that makes it entertaining.
Oh, no. Talk to you later.
Yeah, all right. Talk to you later.
Hey, bye.
Bye.